Hello everybody. Well, I picked up a 12,000 pound winch from Harbor Freight. They're normally like $3.99. They had some super coupon for $2.99, so I snatched one up. It started out to be a very simple review, and I decided to kind of tear it apart, show how it works within reason. Some other items that I needed to mount it to the front of my vehicle for my application. Some other accessories are going to be shown in here. A lot of safety information, this, that, and the other. So it is going to be very, very long. And I didn't even cover as much as I wanted to cover because it was just getting grueling to shoot the video. So if you're interested, take a peek. And if not, hey, feel free to tune out. Hello everybody. I'm going to do a review on this 12,000 pound winch I picked up from Harbor Freight. This is item number 61889 for reference, and this goes under their Badland Winches brand. Now that item number, you will not find it on their website for some odd reason, and I've purchased something in the past that was the same way. But I'm assuming this might be a newer model since it's not on there at all. Now I've had my eye on their 9,000 pound winch for a little while now, and I went with this one for a few reasons. The first one being, this is the one in their lineup that has a cable tensioner built into it, and hopefully you can see these two springs right here. There's a couple of bars, and then there's another bar that it presses down and it holds the cable on the drum. So what will happen is, if you don't have a tensioner on here, this serves two purposes. One, when you're disengaging and free spooling and pulling your cable off, this should hold it tight to the drum with that resistance right there, and it doesn't want to unwind itself and kind of rat's nest on you, so to speak. Secondly, if you're under power and you're winching in, it should help hold the cable down and guide it back and forth across the drum so it doesn't start stacking up on top of each other and creating a mess. That is really the main two reasons why I purchased this. The third one being, and it's something that needs to be considered when you're looking for a winch, just because a winch says it's 12,000 pounds does not mean it pulls 12,000 pounds throughout its cable travel. Meaning there are layers of cable on this drum. And let's just say, for example, this one had 4 layers on it. That 12,000 pound capacity, now this is a straight line pull I'm talking about. I'm not talking about using snatch blocks in that nature to increase your ratio of pulling, but let's just say you did a straight line pull from a tree out to the winch. You're only going to be able to pull that 12,000 pound capability when you're on the first layer on the drum, the first wind of wire down on the drum. In each successive layer that builds up, you lose the pulling capacity immensely. So for example, there's a little chart here on the side. On the first layer, it's 12,000 pounds, like I said. Layer 2, once that cable spools up and jumps up into the next layer, you drop all the way down to 9,517 pounds. Layer 3, 7,886, and layer 4, let's just say this is layer 4, 67 and 32 pounds. Okay? Now one way, if you want to do short pulls and stuff like that, you can remove a lot of the cable off and just lop it off to where you're always working down on the lower layers. Or you need to spool it all out and do something with it so you're pulling down on the first layer. So this came with 65 feet of cable. I'm leaving it just like it is. But just keep in mind, like I said, that's the way these winches are laid out and the way they work. So that's another reason why I went up to one with this capacity, because on the 4th layer I can still pull 6,732 pounds. Now if I ran a snatch block out and connected back to my vehicle, let's say I was doing a vehicle pull, then it will double that capability right there. So I'd be about at the 12,000 pound, which is the max rating that it has anyway. Now I want to say that I'm not a four-wheeler, I don't off-road, I didn't purchase it for this. I'm clearing a property of ours, and I need to skid a lot of railroad ties and get them off of the property. So that's my driver for getting this. In terms of setting it up and using it for a four-wheel drive application, if you're off-roading, this, that, and the other, you kind of need to look elsewhere, but I'm still going to review the actual winch itself. Now keep in mind, this video is going to be quite lengthy. I'm going to go into the winch, I'm going to re-lubricate it, I'll show how it works. I'm going to, of course, eventually get to the point where I set it up on the front of my truck. I'm going to be setting it up in a cradle, and I will have a front receiver hitch on my truck to push it into a quick disconnect just to use for my application. When I'm not using it, it will be disconnected and stored away. So everybody's application is going to be different, but I'm also going to throw in a lot of safety things in here. I may not cover the whole gamut, but respect these things because they will hurt you. There's a lot of potential energy that's stored up in a cable like this, and if this thing comes loose, it can literally kill you or a bystander, and nobody wants that to happen. So I'm going to get into the majority of the components that came with it, and we're going to step through it. Like I said, it's going to be lengthy, but we will get there. Here's a quick shot of the way this one's packaged. They did a really nice job being how heavy this thing is. Several components up top, this insert, of course the winch itself, controller, the fair lead, nothing much to say, no damage on it. Alright, well, I'd mentioned in the last clip that I was going to be skidding a bunch of railroad ties off of one of our investment properties. That's not all I'm using it for. I just wanted to be clear on that. There's tons of overgrowth, saplings, trees, bushes, shrubs, you name it, it's on there. This is the guy that's going to take them out. So let me move on into what was in there. Of course, it came with the owner's manual and safety instructions. And to my surprise, this is one of the best written Harbor Freight manuals I have seen, especially related to the safety precautions and things of that nature. It is chock full of good information. I highly recommend everybody read this 9 or 10 times before operating something like this, and look further beyond this manual as well for safety, because like I'd said, these things can and will kill you given the opportunity. So it's pretty straightforward, it's easy to follow, and we're going to go into some of the items that are listed in here as the video progresses. Now, one thing I do want to note, since I'm on this page right here, hopefully you can see where it says duty cycle, the duration of use. This has a 45 second, or actually a 5% duty cycle. Okay, and basically what that means is, with this 5% on a 15-minute clock right here, you have 45 seconds of winching at the full rated capacity at 12,000 pounds. 45 seconds. That's all you can winch at one time. Then you have to let the motor rest for 14 minutes and 15 seconds to cool down. Okay? So if you're pulling 6,000 pounds, theoretically you should get 1.5 minutes on the trigger. I'm just going to say it like that. It may not be accurate, but don't expect to get out there and pull 12,000 pounds all day long on the trigger, 100% duty cycle. You're not going to get it. So you need to respect this right here. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Good manual. Here's the roller fair lead that came with it. It has nylon bushings in it. It seems to be quite alright. Very heavy construction. It looks to be about 1/8 to 3/16 steel. No complaints there so far. Nice paint. The surfaces look to be ground. It came with a pendant controller here. You can reel the winch, spool it in and out. Plug it in there. I believe this has 12 foot of cable on it, so that should be plenty enough to get you in a safe place to operate it. Now, I did purchase one of their wireless systems for this because my work is not pulling the vehicle. My work is going to be away from the vehicle. So I need to monitor my job from a safe distance. So I have one of those, and I'll outline that in another video. It came with this series of circuit breakers here. These will attach to the battery. We'll cover that later. A bag of hardware. Not much to say there. I believe this is 5 or 6 foot long. This is the ground cable that came with it. I believe this to be number 2 or number 3 gauge. Can't say for certain. It came with a 3/8 hook here. This is a slip hook or a choker hook, however you want to call that. And then this is actually a safety component right here. This rides on this hook, and this is another safety feature, and I'll go ahead and describe this for a moment. When you're free spooling, you can grab this and pull this cable out, okay, because you're gonna have to struggle to get it out somewhat. But if you're winding the winch in and you're getting down to the end of it, do not hold your fingers in here as you're bumping that winch in to get all the cable into it. Because what could potentially happen is if you're holding this, it could pull your hand and everything into that fair lead, and you're going to lose those fingers. So that's what this strap is for. That's why you hold it out here. And if it gets away from you, just let go of it. Okay? The last component it came with is the solenoid box right here. It has leads that come out of it. These 3 are color coded. These go attached to the motor. We'll cover this later. This one right here would go directly to your battery, and then this small one right here goes to ground, and we'll cover that as well. This actually sets on top of the winch here, and then you tighten these screws. This is where you would connect your controller or your wireless controller right here. Not much to say about that. We will be opening it up to look at the innards as we move along. Alright, well, I've opened up the controller box so we could take a peek in there. Fairly straightforward, nothing much to note. I will say that this winch has an Ip66 rating, and basically what that means is dust. It should be dust tight. I'm not sure if it's the entire winch or if it's just this box or how they're rating the entire thing as a whole. But the second one is powerful water jets. Okay, that's the next 6. Okay, so it shouldn't have any harmful effects on that from blasts of water. Now, this is not something that you should submerge. So if you're a four-wheeler, this, that, and the other, and you get down in a pond and submerge the winch, you need to take it apart, dry it out, re-lubricate it, and it should last a long time, or it's going to rust up on you like nothing you've ever seen. So anyhow, here's the solenoid, and it looks to be a dual contact. This black wire here, there's the ground, and then the red wire would come from the battery to energize this, so it'll send the hot lead down into here. When you press the in and the out, it will complete the circuit between either the blue wire or the white wire. So whichever one is which, I do not know, but it will take the power and basically connect this red to blue. The motor will spin one direction, and then when you go in the opposite direction, it will take the red wire and in essence connect it to white, and it will spin the other way. So nothing too much to look at here, all pretty much straightforward. Let's move on. Alright, well, here's a quick shot of the motor itself. This is a 12 volt 6 horsepower motor, and there are 3 connections on the top and there is 1 ground connection on the bottom. These are color coded on the top. There's a red one, a black one, a yellow one, and then the chassis ground, or the ground that goes to the battery itself, is on the bottom side right here. You can't see it. That is also where that little ground wire from the control box will mount. Here's a shot of the other end of the winch. This has a 256:1 gear ratio on it. Basically what that means is the motor is going to turn 256 times to 1 revolution of the drum. That's a 256 to 1. Now there's a 3-stage Planetary gear set in here, and I'm going to take it all apart just to show you how it works. There is a warning sticker or warning tag that was hanging on it. It says if the clutch doesn't move, please don't turn it hard. So don't break your lever off is what it's meaning. There are 2 ways to get around that. If you disengage the clutch, so you could free spool it out, and you cannot re-engage the clutch, there are 2 things that you can try to do. 1, turn the drum by hand until you can get the mesh of the gears to pull in. Or 2, you can bump the controller in or out to spin the drum a little bit, or the gears in here, and try to engage it that way. So this is disengage. This would free spool. After you get everything hooked up, simply turn it around. Now this feels a little bit tight. It seems like there's a little bit of a lack of oil in here. We will be tearing this apart and addressing that as well. Alright, well I've pulled out the shift lever. There's just a socket head cap screw right there in this. Pulled it out. Here's the lever. There's an O-ring on this. There's a rubber gasket, and then this little coned piece, conical piece of steel right there. It just seems a little bit dry, so I'm going to put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on it, and we're going to stick it back together and see if that frees that up any. Feeling better already right there. Let me stick the bolt back in. Go ahead and lubricate the end just a little bit. Okay, I had to get it in this orientation to get that started. Kind of have to hold down on this. Just about there. Do this a little cinching. See if that helped that out any. Oh yeah. Very easy to move now. Just a little bit of lubrication. Let's tear the gearbox apart. Alright, we're getting ready to bust this gearbox open. I've taken off the lever again, and then I believe there's 10 of these socket head cap screws. I'm just now undoing the last one. I've not been in it yet. We're going to explore this together. So I'm going to carefully take this off. Okay. There is a paper gasket around here. Hopefully you can see that. I believe this is the first stage on the Planetary gear set. This should be down in this. Yes. I don't see any washers or anything, so that's stage 1. There is a gear. This would be the sun gear right here, down in that sleeved bearing. So I'll just set this aside. And I believe this will be stage 2 right here. If I can get it out of there. Try to hook it. Here it comes. This should be the second stage. Okay. Looks like there is some form of a washer or something right here. Let's check this out. I can't tell, but that seems to be some form of a plastic. We'll know after I clean it up. Just need to make sure we get that there. And then this one looks like we're going to have to take off the last one and the ring at the same time, perhaps. Yep. Here it comes. That's the ring gear. Push this one out from the other side. Let me make sure there's no washer. You can't see this part. There is something on it, but it's fastened. Okay. So this is the ring gear right here. It doesn't look to be greased on the outside. It looks just to be oiled. And that's probably, if you had a bunch of grease around the outside, it'd be very hard to disengage and re-engage the clutch. This spins in and out. That handle runs down in this groove right here, so when you turn it, it pushes it and pulls it back. And I can see more in there where this engages. We'll get to that momentarily. But at this stage, that's kind of some nasty stuff. This looks to be and feels to be like a lithium-based grease that has moly in it. I'm not sure if it's got graphite. Well, I see that the casting down here looks to be aluminum, so I assume that would not have graphite in it because it would corrode the aluminum. So I'll get this all cleaned out and then I'll show you how it works. Okay, well, I've got everything cleaned up. I'd mentioned that there was some oil around the outside of this, and if it was packed tightly with grease, it'd be very difficult to slide that ring gear in and out to mesh up with this gear, which is cast in this aluminum housing back here. This particular portion is steel. That may not necessarily be true to get it to slide in and out, but when you disengage the clutch and that ring gear comes out and disengages off this mesh, when you're pulling or free spooling the cable out, this ring gear is going to rotate right here. And if you've got a bunch of thick grease in there, you may be hard pressed to do that. So I'm going to go back with some lighter duty grease right here. The stuff that they had in it was just nasty. I don't know what it was. It was almost just sticky. But hopefully you can see down in here. I'm not going to take everything off, but this is the drive shaft right here that's connected to the motor. And down in there, way down in there, hopefully you can see it, there's a brake. Right there in front of my finger, way in there. That's an automatic brake, so when you stop winching, it stops the drum from rotating backwards. Okay? Now this is something that people need to keep in mind if they're changing over to synthetic rope. And I know a lot of people do that so they don't have to mess with the cable, this, that, and the other, but I will never do that because I don't think it's required for me, and there's an extra level of care that needs to go into those cables. And this drum with that brake, especially when you're unwinding under power, if you're letting it out, it actually has to slide along that and overcome that brake to rotate the drum the opposite direction. So keep that in mind. It generates a lot of heat in there, and it can disturb the integrity of your synthetic rope. You know, a lot of them would have a sleeve over it. I'm not going to get off into it. Look for your own. So anyway, keep in mind this drive shaft turns directly off the motor. It's going to be difficult for me to show how it works, but I'm going to do my best. Alright, well, I've got all the components laid out here, cleaned up. Just kind of wanted to show a real working example on how Planetary gear set works. They're actually quite fascinating. This particular gear would be the sun gear. It'll ride in this bushing. And you can see this is the ring gear that's actually cast down in here. Each one of these gear sets has a different pitch on the Planet gears and the ring gear. This one is different than this one, and this one is still yet different than those two. So this is the first stage that goes in here, and you can see that these are the Planet gears. They rotate about the sun. So you kind of have to get things lined up and wiggled in and move the gears a little bit, and it will drop into place. This is my makeshift driving rod right here, and I've made some black marks up this. So I'm going to turn it 1 revolution and just watch how slow this gear turns. This is the reduction. I didn't count it off to see how far it's reducing, but focus on this. Did 1 revolution and we moved almost about a tooth. But you can see I'm spinning this one quite a bit, And after the reduction takes place and comes down to this point, it's slowing it down. Now let's add another layer of reduction. So this one would go on next, and then I'll have to drop on the ring in order to see this work. Okay. And then now it's even slower, it's moving slower, it's reduced it down again on this second stage. And then this washer is a plastic washer, and I've determined all it does is there's a snap ring down in this hole, and there's a groove or a shoulder right here. It goes on like this. All it does is keep these two apart so they don't rub. And then this one is the last and final stage. Same principle, you kind of have to move things around and get it dropped in, and there it is. So then again, we've reduced it even down further on this third stage. And you can see I'm turning this, and we're getting very little movement right here. That's transmitting a lot of torque right here. And then this particular gear meshes and goes into the actual drum itself. So the motor shaft comes through, it spins, and it turns the drum. Now as far as this ring right here, this, when you shift that collar, meshes into the ring that is in that casting, that gear in there. So it in essence locks this and keeps this from turning, this ring gear. Now when you're in free spool, it disengages that, and let's say the motor is sitting still. Hopefully you can see the black mark. This will freewheel and idle through here. And that's how the free spool function works. Now if this were up and locked into that gear, everything in here would be locked up. It will not turn. The only thing that will turn it is the motor shaft. So that's just a general rundown on how they're put together and how they work. I'm of course no means a pro when it comes to this stuff, but give you an idea nonetheless. So now it's time to lubricate this thing, put it back together. Alright, well I'm going to go over the two greases that I'm going to be using for this. The first one, this one's going to go on the outside of the ring gear where it slides back and forth, as well as in the groove that runs about it. This is just a Mystic JT6, just a multi-purpose grease. Nothing too much to say about that. And then on the rest of the gears, Planetary gear set, I'm going to use this Valvoline product. It's a Syn Power full synthetic grease. This is a lithium based grease that is moly fortified, and this is an extreme pressure grease. I believe this was about $7 at the local auto parts store. This is what I'm going to use in it, and that's what these are the two that will be servicing it throughout its life, providing I need to go in it again. Alright, well we're getting ready to start going back together with it. Just to kind of give you an idea on what I've done. You can see I've just pretty much coated everything in the grease here. Just kind of a fairly thick layer over everything. Not too crazy, just a pretty good dab. Just put a tiny bit around here, nothing right here. This goes inside the drum. Now I did wipe my finger across it to help prevent any rusting. Now on the ring gear itself, I have to put these two together before I put the ring gear in. Get the ring gear up here and show you what I've done. Just pretty much went on the inside and just filled all the teeth. That's about all I used. Now on the outside I did a thin layer over everything, but I gave a couple daub spots in here that'll get distributed around later as this thing free spools. And on the inside of this I've done just a light film. Not too crazy there, because like I said, this is the area that needs to turn fairly easily, or you're going to fight trying to get your cable out. Now there is a groove in here like I'd noted. You can see that it is offset. This side that it's closest to goes in first. So I don't know if you can see over here where I'm working, but I just need to drop this gear set down in here the other way. Goes in like this. Kind of twist and wind things around. Set it in there. It's a greasy job. And just take some of this off right here and just throw it right down in there. And this will get distributed around where it can get where it needs to go as it's put under power. So now I will just put it in, and like I said, it goes this way. That gear, into that gear goes first. Just slide it in there. Now I need to try to rotate it and get this to drop down into that drum. There. Okay. So now I need to lubricate the next stage, and we'll put that in as well. Alright, well, we're going in with the second stage now. Lubricated it the same way as before. And this washer right here, like I said, there's a recessed area that actually sits down on this over that snap ring. So I'll just squeeze it on there. It'll get grease on it as I put it in. Same principle, just going to guide it in. May have to wiggle it around a little bit, rotate things. There we go, there's that one. Alright, here goes the last one. Same as before. This one actually is going to sit outside of the ring gear because it will go up into the gear that's in the housing. Alright, well, we're coming down the home stretch. I've got the pinion lubricated, or the sun gear. I'm going to try to rotate things around, get that dropped in. Get that little dab off the end there. Now I'm going to put just a little bit around here. Not a whole bunch, just some. About like that. And same principle here, I put on the paper gasket and lined up the holes. Just filled up the mesh. Just going to put a little bit around here. I'm not going to pack this hole full. It's not going to require much in there at all. That will do it. Now this part can be tricky. So you have to get everything just right. Hopefully I'll get lucky. Rotate things around. And I did. And on mine, there are a series of digits right here. That's how I know I've got it back the way it came off. If you're working on something like that, that's not, you might mark the housing. And then just start putting in the screws. I'm going to hold it out just a little so I can make sure the gasket's lining up. I will get the rest of these installed and tightened up, and then we should just be down to reinstalling the lever. Alright, well, this is the last piece of the puzzle, is putting the lever back in. I am going to use a little bit of standard multi-purpose grease. I'm going to put a little thin layer right here on the top, just a little bit. And I'm going to put a little bit right underneath here, just a little tiny bit. Go ahead and stick on this piece here. Go ahead and stick on the washer. And I'm going to put a little bit down in this hole, this slot. A little on the pin. And then just a light coating around here. And put it in. I think I'm going to have to hold down on it to get this started, or turn it. There we go, it wasn't down in the groove. Gonna have to wiggle it back and forth to find where it's going to drop in all the way. And there we go. Wipe off the excess grease. and that is super smooth. Way better than it was when it came out of the box. Alright, well, I'm going to be doing all of this again because I don't have my cradle yet to mount it to, but I'm going to go ahead and go over the wiring and the mounting of the actual control box. I guess you could mount this elsewhere if you wanted to. You'd have to come up with a way. But there are two hooks on the front of it. Loosen these screws all the way to out and just hook it over those two. Drop it down and then tighten up these two screws. And that's all it takes. Alright, well, the wiring to the motor is almost self-explanatory. Quite simple. There are 3 color-coded posts on the top. Hopefully you can see they are black, yellow, and red. The wire with the yellow boot. Yellow, black boot to black. Red boot to red. And once these are tightened up, you can wiggle around these boots over these connections. Now there's a connection on the bottom of the motor. I can't show that one, but that's where this ground wire goes that comes out of the box, as well as the black ground wire that came with the unit that runs directly to the negative battery post on the battery. The last connection is the long red whip that goes to the positive post on the battery. But what you will put on the battery first is a circuit breaker. This will get fixed directly to the battery, and then this wire goes right here. And that is it as far as making the connections to the winch. Now if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to run wires to the back of the vehicle and mount something like this on the back, you can actually buy a kit. They're kind of pricey, with enough cable and quick disconnects to get it all the way to the back. But it also comes with, depending on the kit you purchase, with a solenoid shutoff. You would mount a solenoid underneath the truck hood or the vehicle hood. You would in essence wire this to one side of it, and then the other side of it would go out to the winch, and then the solenoid would be energized by a switch. So you would get no power until you flick that switch on. Be a pretty good safety thing to have right there. Here's a quick shot of the winch in its entirety. This is the first time I've got back far enough to fit it all in the frame. It's actually not a bad looking machine in my opinion. I am getting tired of moving it around. It weighs about 80-85 pounds, somewhere around in there. Alright, well, I received my front mounted receiver a couple of days ago and installed it on my truck last night. That went off with no issues. I received this today. This is my cradle for the winch, and I picked this up from Northern Tool, and they retail for $79.99. The construction on it is quite nice. It looks to be a heavier build than the Harbor Freight one, even though it was a little bit more money. I went this direction because it does have a 12,500 pound line pull on it that you can put at its rating. It's a nice construction, like I said. Everything is nicely welded, full weld beads where they're really important. There are some spot welds on the bottom where this handles mount on. Hopefully you can kind of see it. Kind of a mini review in the review. It's got the standard 4.5, I believe, by 10 bolt pattern on it right here. So this winch should mount on it without any alteration to it. There are some slots and different bolt patterns in here. I don't know what they would fit, but it's just an idea for making something like this modular. I could load this up in the back, load it up in the front, etc. I do believe I'm going to have a clearance issue with my bumper. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the winch in to put the pin. So I may have to get an extension tube for my purposes. It's just something to keep in mind. So I'm getting ready to mount it up right now. This is all the hardware that came with the winch. There are 4 bolts, 4 lock washers, 4 washers, and 4 of these square nuts. These actually fit up in the casting, and the bolt will come up from the bottom to lock it in place. These 2 over here and all this series of stuff is to mount the fair lead, and that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to put the fair lead on first. Now I'm going to try to put the bolt going in with the nut on the back, and hopefully I'll have enough room to put the winch in. We will find out. Alright, I've got the fair lead mounted here. I've I did have to run the bolt in from the back, so the bolt went in by itself. Of course, the fair lead, a flat washer, lock washer, and a nut, and just cinched it all up. Everything lined up just like it was meant to be. I don't know if you can see down in here, but I've probably got 3/16 of an inch at best clearance. It's very tight, but it's going to work just fine. Alright, well, I'm getting ready to mount the winch. I've taken these square nuts and put them in each of these holes, these slots, and then of course it will get a bolt. The lock washer goes on first, the flat washer, and these will be fed up from the bottom. I've also snipped off the cable tie that was holding this wire rope and went ahead and spooled some out by hand and pushed it through the fair lead. Make sure you do that or you will not be able to get that in after the fact. So now it's just a matter of setting it up on here, lining it up, and putting the bolts in and tightening them up. So I'm going to try to stay out of the way, just to kind of show you how I'm doing it. Really straightforward. And then I'll work with my fingers under here and get the bolts lined up and just tighten all 4 of them. Alright, well, I've wound the cable back in by hand. Everything's looking good. I'm going to go ahead and put the hook on. Simply pull out this cotter pin here. Stick it back in and bend the ears around. And that will be a completed step right there. And what I'm going to do is I'll finish bending this around, but before I do, I'm going to nip it off a little bit shorter, and then I'll squeeze it with a pair of pliers around there to get it really close to this pin, because this is just something else that can hook you and slice you open. Alright, here's an example on how I terminated the end like I was speaking of. You can see I clipped them a little shorter and then squeezed them around tight to that pin. Just less chance to get snagged on it. Okay, well, I did have an interference issue, so I've taken the winch back off. I'm going to have to modify mine. You can buy an extension to put on these and extend things out further, but to my understanding, they reduce your capability or your capacity by about 50%. So I'm welding one up here, and the way I'm basically doing it is I'm taking my old hitch, I've lopped the end off. I've also taken this part and lopped it off here to shorten it up a little bit. And then I bought one of these 2.5 to 2 inch reducer sleeves for about 15 bucks. I lopped a couple sections off there. This is the original hole, and I've pierced a new hole on the other end. These are going to get plug welded in. So the way I'm going to attack this is I'll dress everything up and get it prepared. This is going to get welded directly on here, just like that. I'll weld around its perimeter. Then this sleeve is going to go on like that. I'll weld all the way around here, all the way around here, and then fill up these plug wells, and that will be a very, very strong connection right there. And now it gets me out with the clearance I need to clear my bumper. Just an idea. Alright, well, everything's been welded up and painted. They're not the prettiest beads in the world, but you know what? It's going to work. Filled the plugs with plug welds and kind of ground them off flush. Nothing too crazy. Dusted it with some black paint. Now it's ready to go. Okay, I've got the winch reinstalled in the cradle now. I need to go ahead and mock everything up on the truck and actually hook it up to power to make sure it actually works. I haven't even powered it up yet. I am going to hack the cables up, so I need to test that first, and I'm going to put in one of these SR175 connectors, quick disconnect. These, I don't know how much these really do cost. A friend of mine picked one up for me. His cost $10. That's all I had to outlay for this. So I'll make it all up and then we'll move on from there. Alright, well, I've made up my connections, cut them where I needed them for my application. Soldered everything, looks good. Now I can move on. Alright, well, clearly it's nighttime, but I wanted to come out and just kind of show the setup here. I've got it mounted in. Here's my connector that comes from the winch itself. And what I've got is I put the other one right here and it's bolted in. And I've got this dust boot on here. And this is where I make my connection. right here. So when it's not in use, it will be stored away. That will be capped off and everything's good. So those wires snake up in here where they don't contact anything. The ground simply just goes to this ground terminal right here. And the hot lead comes down into this bank of circuit breakers. And you need to make sure that you put the right bus right here on the battery terminal. They actually had this particular bolt in this other hole down here, and that was incorrect. On the bottom of this, on one of these buses, it will say battery. That goes here. If it's not there for any particular reason, then there are like silver posts on one side and brass on the other, or copper. The copper will go to the terminal. So you just need to make sure you get these in there in that orientation. So that's the basic setup for my rig. I'm not really going off into this because everybody else is different. Alright, well, after everything is set up and ready to roll, the next thing to do is kind of go out and pre-stretch that cable and make sure you get it under load and spool it up on the drum properly. And what I mean by that is you need to release all the cable and free spool it out, leaving at least 5 wraps on the drum. And then hook to an anchor point somewhere, put the vehicle in neutral, and wind that in, and it will pull that cable in and track it very nice and neat back and forth. There'll be no overlaps, it will just work. And that's the way you need to attack it right there. Now, after you use it and through winching applications, you know, the angle and everything, it will not necessarily spool up 100% properly. It may be overlapped here and there. So after you do a winching application, to preserve everything and get everything nice and neat for the next time, go out and do that procedure again. Pull it all out, anchor yourself, and pull the load back in. Now you need at least 500 pounds to do this. Rolling vehicle load will probably take care of it. If you're maybe on a little bit of a downhill, step on the brake a little bit, give it a little bit of load and work it in, and it will spool that cable up and it will be pretty and nice for the next time. While we're kind of on the subject of wire rope or cable, you do not ever handle this stuff without having a very, very heavy pair of work gloves on. Main reason is they will break strands from time to time and they will stick off the cable. So if you're handling it barehanded, you can actually grab one of those and pierce your skin with it. Secondly, you never let this stuff run through your hand when you're holding on it. You always go hand over hand if you're working with it. You can grab an area, let it go, or follow it, and then grab another one. But do not let that slide through your hand, because it will gash you open or at least penetrate your skin. Alright, well, with the winch and everything set up on the vehicle, we need some other products to make things happen. So there are some accessories or rigging, so to speak, that you will need. Everybody's application will be different. In my case, I'm going to go through the list of items that I have. And now keep in mind that your rigging and what you're trying to achieve is only as good as your weakest link. So everything is rated. So if you've got something rated low coupled with a bunch of components that are rated high, the low one is going to fail the first. So this is in essence a tree saver or a tree trunk protector that I use for an anchor point. This happens to be 3 inches wide. It's about 10 feet long. I have 2 of them, and I believe they have about a 26,000 pound rating. So they are webbed. They're made out of a polyester, so it does not stretch. I'll get into that a little bit more as we progress. So maybe you wrap this around a tree, just like so, and then you bring in a shackle and you hook to that, and maybe hook to a load, or you hook to a snatch block, whatever. So that is just one item on the list. Now here's a shackle. This is rated at 20,000 pounds. You would simply rotate it sideways, put your wire rope around the pulley, close it, and hook it or use a shackle and use it in that manner, and it will allow you to redirect your load or snatch back to a vehicle if that's what you were doing, and reduce the load on the winch, or get in essence a 2-to-1 pull. This right here is a 20-foot polyester webbing. This is a tow strap. This is not a recovery strap or a snatch strap. You never want to use a recovery strap or a snatch strap in a winching application. They are made of nylon primarily, and they are designed to stretch like a rubber band. So as they're stretching out, they're building up a lot of kinetic energy in there, and at some point it will snatch that vehicle or that load out. They're made for snatching applications. You never want to use one in a situation like just a standard winching application. If this thing breaks loose in a winching application or even a snatching application, you will have a projectile or a lot of energy coming down that path. So do a lot of homework and research on these things. Never use a recovery strap in a winching application, period. Now let's move off into shackles. This is a 3/4 inch shackle. This is not a D-ring. People call them D-ring shackles by default, but it is not a D. This is more closely resembled to a bow shackle, hence the bow. But this is not a bow shackle. This is actually an anchor shackle. There is a difference. And it should be, anything that is worth its weight should have a working load limit stamped into it right here. This one happens to be 4 3/4 tons, so somewhere around 9,500 or 9,800 pounds. Okay, and there is a pin in here that threads in. Now that 9,500 pounds, that is its working load limit. These are typically rated at a 5-to-1, meaning there is 5-to-1 safety built into this thing. So in essence, 5 times that 4 3/4 tons before it fails. So this is plenty enough for anything that I need to do, but do your own homework on these things. Now when you're using these and you're slinging out or capturing things, when you dial this all the way in, don't just tighten it all the way up. Always back it off 1/4 to a 1/2 turn. Reason being, if you tighten that all the way up and you're pulling on your load, it can actually tighten this up and you will not be able to get this loose, or you're going to need some tools to do it. So always move it off about a 1/2 turn. Okay, so here's a couple of hooks, or clevis hooks. This will be the clevis right here. These are, I believe, 5/16 for a chain. This one is a slip hook, meaning the chain will go through here, or a choker, and it will come around and it will choke. This is a grab hook. You can hopefully see the difference in the two hooks there. This one has a slot, as this one's more open. This is so you can put a link of chain right in here and it will grab it. It'll grab hook. So just know the difference in those two. That's pretty much the standard rundown on some of the items that might be required. So I'll give a couple of rigging scenarios. Alright, well here's two simple riggings that you might entertain for like a vehicle extraction or something along those lines. This side over here is utilizing a snatch block, an anchor shackle, and of course a tree strap or tree trunk protector right here. So the protector would go around the tree, it would be hooked to the shackle, and of course we would have the snatch block right here. This will give you a 2-to-1 advantage, providing that the cable from the winch The wire rope runs in, goes around the snatch block, and attaches back to the vehicle, not the winch mount point. You want to put it somewhere else. So the winch cable comes out, it goes back maybe to an anchor point or something along those lines. That'll give you a 2-to-1 advantage. That'll in essence have the load on the winch, or in essence make the winch twice as powerful, however you want to describe that. Now this one over here would be some setup for like a straight line pull. Same type of setup. We've got the anchor shackle right here. We have it fixed to an object, we'll say it's a tree, and then here is the end of your winch cable simulated, and that will give you a straight line pull. So you won't get any advantage, mechanical advantage, however you will get a straight line pull in this situation. Now you notice the hook is up. Hook up. When you hook, hook up. Reason for that is if this hook fails for any reason, distorts and lets go, it will drive that energy down into the ground when it snaps, as opposed to being hooked down. If this were to let go or deform in this area, it would want to slingshot over the top and potentially hurt someone. So always hook up. Okay, well here's a scenario where we're hooking up to the back of the vehicle. If you had a tree saver around some fixed object and you were trying to anchor the vehicle down in the rear, you could use a link or an anchor just like this and maybe connect to an anchor point in the back. But if you needed more length, you could add another strap just like this, and in essence coming around and attach to the vehicle. Okay? Now, one thing you never want to do is attach anything to a ball on a receiver, because that ball is actually a weak link, and if that snaps for any reason, that becomes a bullet, and it can really hurt somebody or do some major damage. So you never hook to a ball, wrap a chain around it, this, that, and the other, or somebody could be seriously injured. Alright, we've been playing around with it. It's working great. Walk my line here. Always use a heavy blanket or some form of weight. This is a shipping blanket on the cable. If you've got a snatch block set up, put one on each line. So if the line does snap or it comes loose for any reason, it will absorb the energy and take the cable to the ground and release all the energy out of it. Here's the grubber chain. I guess they call it a clump grubber. You've got to get it on there just right and get these tines on the chain going inwards, but you can see this big clump that we took out here. Uprooted it no problem. Been using this particular grubber here. This thing is awesome, and I've actually pulled out some saplings that were down about a ½ inch. The trick is to try to grab it towards the back side, so as it pulls it bites in and it won't slip off. But here's some things that were pulled out with it. This whole section of uprooted stuff right here. It's just a matter of pushing the trigger. The wireless remote is great. You can stay out by the work, get to a safe distance, pull them out. I'm going to do a couple pulls maybe in this area here. Show you the setup and show how easy they come out. Alright, well, I've got the grubber hooked up on a root system down here on this one. I'm going to back off. My wife's got the remote. She's going to go ahead and do the work on it. So here we go. Okay. Pulled that out of there like it's nothing. I'm going to go back and grab this one right here. Alright, we're going to grab this one here. Slack up. Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Tell me, guys. Doesn't get any easier than that. No digging. Alright, well, I've been taking out this row of old fence posts here. Got the grubber hooked up. Started at the furthest one away and winching back so I don't have to spool out as much. So let's see if we can get this. That's actually the first one that came out with the plug attached to it, the concrete. The rest of them been snapping off about 8 inches below the ground. I'd rather them do that than have to deal with the plug, but hey, you know, came out of there that easy. Alright, well, I'm pretty sold on this winching business to remove trees even. Got a snatch block with a tree saver right here. My truck's actually sitting right there and it's anchored. Ran up this way. This thing is dead, but just yanked that out of there and the winch didn't even hesitate. Just pulled it right out. Left with a big hole. This one right here that's real close to the house is getting ready to come out. Alright, same setup, different tree. I'm going to try to pull this one out. I've already got it coming over a little bit. Just bumping it out. And there we have it. Beautiful. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed the video and you gleaned a little bit of information from it. This is by no means the end-all be-all in terms of rigging, this, that, and the other, but the products that I have been using and outlined in this video have been outstanding. I have no complaints whatsoever. I hope this helps someone in some way. Thanks for watching and good luck.